Hey everybody! So in this video I'll be going over another example of a production possibilities frontier from chapter 2. So this is going to be a trade model. So let's say we have Dunder Mifflin. It's going to be represented by D, right? And they produce two things. So they produce only paper, P, and staples, S, right? And then we also know that they have a fixed number of resources. Right? So they produce only paper and staples. They have a fixed number of resources, so resources being like the things that you need to produce paper and staples. And then we're also going to assume that technology is not changing. So there's going to be two extremes, right? So two extremes. Right, so if Dunder Mifflin dedicates all resources to paper, right, we can say that they're gonna be able to produce 500 sheets of paper, right, and then 0 staples if they do that, right? But also if they're the other extreme, so if they dedicate all their resources to staples, then they're gonna be producing 0 sheets of paper and say 1,000 staples, right? So these are two extremes, but there's gonna be an in-between. So the key here is, right, they can make a combination, right? So they can make a combo, anything in between. So let's draw the production possibilities frontier. Scooch this up, hopefully this is not blurry. There we go, okay. Right, so we have a production, so a PPF. So we production possibilities frontier, right? We have a PPF. So basically this is just an illustration, so it shows all possible combos of production, right? So with the amount of resources that Dunder Mifflin has, like what combination of their whatever they're producing can they actually produce? So it just shows us all possible combinations of production. So let's draw our graph. Scooch this down. Right, so we have our little graph, also known as the PPF. All right, I'm going to put paper here on the y-axis, and then I'll have staples on the x-axis. Right, so I said here we're going to label our two extremes, so this was 500, right? So if they produce 0 staples, they're going to produce 500 sheets of paper, right? Because in this case, they're dedicating all of their resources to producing paper. Now, on the other hand, if they're producing 0 sheets of paper, so let's go down to 0, right? They're going to be producing 1,000 staples, the other extreme right here. So we can draw a line connecting the two. There we go. Right, and so we were kind of given 2 points, so let's just label point A up here and point B down here. Right, so A, what would this be? Well, we know that this is going to be impossible, right? Because there's just not enough resources to produce up here, right? So we can say impossible because not enough resources, right? And then, so what about point B? Right, so B is considered inefficient. Is that spelled right? I think so. It's inefficient, right? Because they're not using all of the resources. They could be producing maybe, instead of right here, they could be producing up here at maybe 250 sheets of paper instead of down here, right? Or they could be going all the way over here at like 900 staples, but they're just not allocating all their resources efficiently because they are not using all resources, right? Something along those lines. So the next key thing that you want to be aware of here is the slope, right? So the slope is rise over run, right? So in our case, what do we have? Well, we have negative 500 over 1,000, right? Because this the rise right here is like the 500, right? It's our y-axis, so it's 500 to 0 is just negative 500, and then our run is positive 1,000, right? So it's negative 500 over 1,000. So here you want to be careful. You want to make sure you're including your units, right? So because our rise is the y-axis, we're dealing with paper, right? So the rise, negative 500 is going to be P, and the 1,000 is going to be, it's going to be staples, right? Because our x-axis here is staples. So you always want to make sure you're including the units, right? So you can simplify this. It ends up being negative 1/2 P over S, right? And what does this mean again? Well, it means that Dunder Mifflin gives up 1 sheet of paper for every 2 staples, right? So I'll write this down here. I'll maybe scooch this down just a tad, right? So this means Dunder Mifflin gives up 1 P, right? So 1 sheet of paper for every 2 staples, right? For every 2 S. So you're giving up 1 P for every 2 staples. So the most important thing about the slope thus far is that you should know, right? So this is the key. Scoot it down just a little bit more. So this is the key, right? You're gonna need this for a lot of if not all of this chapter, a lot of this chapter, right? So we know that what you want to know is that the absolute value of the slope, oops, should not be double. I'm used to doing that from that's funny, from math 10A, right? This is supposed to be the absolute value of the slope is the opportunity cost of the good on the x-axis, right? So this is the key. So the absolute value of the slope is the opportunity cost of the good on the x-axis, right? So in our case, we know that the absolute value of negative 1/2 is 1/2. So 1/2 P over S is the opportunity cost of staples in our case, right? And something you want to keep in mind is the slope is negative, right? Because that's just technically what it is, because it's downward. It's a downward sloping line, right? So the slope here is negative because we go down, right? This is negative. Positive gives us negative, right? But opportunity cost will always be stated in this class as a positive number. So you're not going to have to worry about, you know, is it going to be negative or is it positive? Just know that the slope is negative because it's downward sloping, right? But then when you read it as opportunity cost, you're just going to get rid of the negative. That's why we're doing the absolute value, right? So our key here is the absolute value of the slope is the opportunity cost of the good on the x-axis. So that's about as far as we've gotten. You'll see this elaborated on a lot more next week in lecture. Hopefully this was helpful. Stay healthy. Bye.